Okay, yeah. So today's sutta is Majjhima Nikaya 62, which is the longer advice to Venerable Rahula. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. When the Buddha robed up in the morning, taking his bowl and robe, he entered Savatthi for alms. There he met Venerable Rahula, who also robed up and followed behind him. The Buddha looked back and said, Rahula, you should see any kind of form at all, past, future or present, internal, external, coarse or fine, inferior or superior, far or near, all form as it actually is, with right understanding. This is not mine, I am not this is not myself. Rahula asked in return, only form, auspicious one, only form? Form as well as feeling, as perception, activities and consciousness. In other words, the five aggregates. So the five aggregates should be seen as this is not mine, I am not this, and this is not myself. So then the Venerable Rahula thought, well, who would go to the village for alms today after being advised directly by the Buddha? Turning back, he sat down cross-legged at the root of a certain tree, setting his body straight, establishing recollection at the fore. Venerable Sariputta saw him there and addressed him. Rahula developed the recollection of breathing. When recollection of breathing is developed and cultivated, it is very fruitful and very beneficial. Then later in the afternoon, Rahula went out for retreat, went to the Buddha and asked him, Venerable Sir, how is the recollection of the breathing developed and cultivated so that it's fruitful and beneficial? So then the Buddha begins the longer instruction saying, anything internal pertaining to oneself that is hard, solid, appropriated. This includes head of the hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bones, bone marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, intestines, mesentery, and undigested food, feces, or anything else internal pertaining to oneself that's hard, solid, and appropriated. This is called the internal earth element. Both the internal earth element and the external earth element are just the earth element. This should be seen as it is with right understanding. This is not mine, I'm not this is not myself. Having seen it with right understanding, one grows disenchanted with the earth element. One rids the mind of the passion for the earth element. Then goes to describe the water element. So water element may be internal or external. What is the internal water element? Anything internal pertaining to oneself that's watery and appropriated. This includes bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, saliva, snot, synovial fluid, urine, anything else internal pertaining to oneself that's water, watery, or appropriated. This is called the internal water element. Both internal and external water element are just the water element. So this should be seen with right understanding, like this is not mine, I'm not this is not myself, and so on. So the fire element internally, it's anything that's fiery, warm, hot, appropriated, obviously. This includes the warmth, that which warms, that which ages, that which heats you up when feverish, that which properly digests food and drink, anything else internal pertaining to oneself that's fiery or appropriated. This is called the internal fire element. Both internal and external fire elements there. Same. Needs to be seen as this is not mine, that's not myself, I'm not this and that's not myself, in order for mind to be rid of the passion for the fire element. And then the air element goes that anything airy pertaining to oneself. So winds that go up and down, winds in the belly or the bowels, winds that flow through the limbs, in breath, out breath, anything else internal pertaining to oneself that's airy, and appropriated. This is called the internal air element. Both internal and external means the air element is there. So this also needs to be seen as this is not mine, I'm not this is not myself. So the space element is added here for practical reasons. Well, I'll explain that later. So any space element that may be internal or external. What is internal space element? Anything internal and pertaining to oneself that is spacious and appropriated. Includes ear canals, nostrils, mouth, space for swallowing what is eaten and drunk, space where it stays, space for excreting it from the nether regions, or anything else internal pertaining to oneself that's spacious and appropriated. This is called the internal space element, and both internal space element and the external space element means the space element is just there. This should be seen with right understanding. This is not mine, I'm not this is not myself. Having seen it with right understanding, he grows disenchanted with the space element. He rids the mind of passion for the space element. So then the Buddha gives him a bit of a more kind of even more practical context to develop. Says, develop your mind like earth, or your mind is added here obviously for the sake of clarity, but just says develop yourself like earth. Just develop like earth. When you develop like earth, arisen agreeable and disagreeable pressures will not occupy your mind. Suppose they were to toss both clean and unclean things on the earth like feces, urine, spit, pus, and blood, the earth isn't horrified, repelled, or disgusted because of this. In the same way, develop like earth. For when you develop like earth, arisen agreeable and disagreeable pressures will not endure with a grip on your mind. Develop like water, for when you develop like water, arisen agreeable and disagreeable pressure will not occupy your mind. Suppose there were to wash both clean and unclean things in the water, like feces, urine, spit, pus, and blood. The water isn't horrified, repelled, disgusted because of this. So in the same way, develop like water. When you develop like water, arisen agreeable and disagreeable pressures will not endure with a grip on your mind. Then develop like fire, kind of in the same way, so that arisen and agreeable, disagreeable pressures do not occupy your mind, because the fire burns both clean and unclean things, and the fire isn't horrified, repelled, and disgusted because of any of that. Develop your mind like air, because the wind blows on both clean and unclean things like feces, urine, spit, pus, and blood, and the wind isn't horrified, repelled. Basically, it's indifferent. So in the same way, you should develop like earth, water, fire, air, so that arisen agreeable and disagreeable pressures, pasa, common translations, contact, will not endure with a grip on your mind. So basically your mind will be above that which is pressuring it. And the last is develop like space. For when you develop like space, arisen agreeable, disagreeable pressures won't occupy your mind. Just as a space is not established anywhere, in the same way, develop like space, so don't be established anywhere. Then it goes into develop friendliness, so that any ill will be abandoned. Develop compassion, so that any annoyance will be abandoned. Develop contentment, so that any discontent will be abandoned. Develop equanimity, so that any resistance, fatiga, will be abandoned. Develop perception of non-beauty, develop the perception of impermanence, and then it goes at the end, develop the recollection of breathing, that the whole question started with. So, before we go to the recollection of breathing, so let's just quickly address these. Well, maybe not so quickly. So the whole element contemplation, like obviously, people can start abstractly in a sense of thinking about solid, hard things that are earth, that are made of stone, and so on, just to get the idea. But the point is to discern that internal earth element. That which is usually overlooked, that which is usually not seen, that which is usually peripheral, that which is usually assumed and taken for granted and appropriated, as every passage here says. So the point is not to observe or monitor or attend to with your senses to earth, water, fire, air. The point is to include basically things, just broad things in your experience that you generally overlook because your attention is too absorbed with this thing or the other. Include those peripheral things, so to see them as partaking in the same nature as this obvious earth around you, obvious fire, air, water, and so on. That's why in other suttas, when the Buddha talked about the elements, the element contemplation, it always kind of starts by, well, look at these great mountains and see how they erode and get destroyed. What is to be said of this little kind of insignificant, weak, soft body? So the point is, you could try and kind of induce these feelings of like, okay, my body will change because the great earth element changed, because the great water element changed. But in order for that to not be abstract, there needs to be something in your experience as a whole that you now recognize, that you now see as that internal earth element, that internal solid, that internal aspect of the airy, watery, fiery space. So that's what I mean. Like, it's not about discerning it through your direct attention and figuring it out. It's about getting used to that which is already there. So instead of trying to attend to your body directly, to see hair, nails, teeth, see it at the back of your mind without needing to attend to it directly, but know that there is hair, nails, teeth, flesh, sinews, and bone. There has to be there. So that peripheral knowledge that's not directly attended. So basically, you have to refrain from your tendency, from the desire to directly attend it and dissect it, because it will be object of your senses. You don't want to see the body on the level of the object of your senses, which is sight, sound, smell, taste, sensations. You want to see the body on the level of the sense bases. You want to see the internal body, the one that's appropriated, the one that doesn't directly appear, the one that's always overlooked, because that's where the problem is. So the whole practice of the 4 elements, it's not about memorizing all these things that the Buddha listed are solid and earthy and watery and fiery. It's more like discerning any of those aspects. And sure, even if you think in those specific terms, that's fine, obviously. But you need to think of them peripherally. You need to be seeing them peripherally. It needs to start to pertain to the knowledge of what's already there, as opposed to, things are only there when I look at them directly. The moment my attention lapses, I forget about them. And that's not, well, pretty much that. No contemplation works like that. So the point of the 4 great element contemplation is to always have a reference point of your background, of that peripheral thing that endures, that shares the same nature like things that you do access with your senses directly. Sight, sound, smell, taste, sensations. And when you look at those things that are obviously changing, you don't need to convince yourself that, okay, so now because of that, my internal body will also change. No, by seeing it sufficiently enough that it's the same thing, as in shares the same nature, as it says, both internal or external, doesn't matter what kind of specific differences would have been perceived and evolved. Fundamentally, anything pertaining to internal, anything pertaining to external that you can observe means the earth element is just there. And that's what you want to teach your mind. That's what you want to sink in. You want to know that anything internal, as I said, doesn't matter, like vague, clear, big or small, past, future, anything internal, anything external shares the same nature. So then when the obvious nature of external things is seen or you get reminded of, the internal counterpart cannot not be affected by it. That's what I mean. Like, that's why I say, like, you won't have to convince yourself then that this internal is also like that external, because it is. Because you've seen it enough that it pertains to that shares exactly the same nature. So if all these things of that nature are obvious subject to change, nothing else then that shares that nature cannot escape it. So that's how you include, that's how you contemplate this, the 4 elements. In that sense, they would result in this passion. Because the entire world of passion exists when you ignore in the peripheral and being absorbed in the object of your senses. Obviously, being mesmerized and trapped through the pleasure that you get, through avoidance of an aversion towards pain, offers of management, offers of escape, and so on. You keep overlooking the bigger picture, the experience as a whole, how we say it. And that's why even if you tell yourself, oh yes, I know this body is like these great elements, you're not really feeling it on that level. So the real contemplation is, yes, contemplate how these great elements change, how you cannot be exempt from that, and then feel it. Feel how you cannot be exempt from that. And don't try to then psychologize and get rid of that uncomfortable feeling that might come up. No, just leave it there. Because that's how it feels to take something that's not yours as yours, to appropriate it. It feels dangerous. Don't try to, I must get rid of this danger because it's unpleasant. I must concentrate. I must meditate. I must calm down or something. No, don't make it worse, but at the same time recognize, no. This danger is there affecting me only because I'm taking what I shouldn't be taking up. So if you leave it there long enough, don't try to get rid of it, don't act out of it for sure, you stop taking it. When the danger doesn't touch you anymore, you know you would have let go of the bait. So that's the earth, water, fire, same. Whichever. You don't even have to go out to earth and then water. Just take any on a different day. It doesn't matter. They all stand for the same principle. They all stand for that same peripheral that's usually being overlooked. They all stand for that lack of or insufficient yoniso, to put it that way. And the space element is included because, yes, it's not primary on the level of the four elements, but it's practical. Like you could see everything else and then you could kind of see or even think space in between. So now you include the space in between as the element, as the thing that changed, that's defined by things that's in space and so on. Either way, the point is you can't appropriate it, even if you want to. So you want to then recognize that which you do appropriate, your internal sense bases, eyes, ears, nose, body, and so on, that too cannot be appropriated, even if you want to. But it will take a while for that to sink in. And for the duration of that whole practice, you need to have been and sustain your withdrawal from unwholesome states, virtue, restraint, and everything else. Just without it, it's like, well, you're not going to get anywhere. So then these kind of more poetic similes: develop your mind like earth, develop yourself like water, like fire, in the same, basically the context you strive for. If the whole thing is unownable, means the whole thing is not yours, means the whole thing is not your problem. So whatever your eyes see, hear, smell, taste, touch, you won't be desiring it, and you certainly won't be repelled by it, because it's not your problem. So then he goes on to develop friendliness. For you to develop friendliness, and ill will be abandoned. Maybe we can address that later, these four Brahma Viharas. So let's go back to the recollection of the breathing then. It says, so it will be obviously very fruitful and beneficial. And then it goes to the standard description at the end of it, saying, when a bhikkhu gone to wilderness, the roof of a tree, the root of a tree, or to an empty hut, where was I? Oh yeah, the screen changed. So, gone to wilderness or to the root of a tree or an empty hut, sits down, cross-legged, sets the body straight, and establishes a recollection at the four. Recollected, he breathes in. Recollected, he breathes out. Breathing in long, he understands, I'm breathing in long. Breathing out long, he understands, I'm breathing out long. Breathing in short, he understands, I'm breathing in short. Breathing out short, he understands, I'm breathing out short. He trains like this. Experiencing the whole body, I'll breathe in. He trains like this. Experiencing the whole body, I'll breathe out. Calming the bodily activity, I'll breathe in. He trains calming the body activity, I'll breathe out. So you can already see how it starts. Recollected. So non-forgetfully, he breathes in. Non-forgetfully, he breathes out. That's the practice in and of itself. There's no new steps that you add to this. Everything else that follows is within this thing. Recollected, he breathes in. Recollected, he breathes out. That doesn't change. So if you think, if you go to the next step, quote unquote, I'll breathe in long, and you already lost your recollection, you are not breathing in long with understanding. So in other words, practice recollectedly breathing in, recollectedly breathing out at the peripheral. That's kind of the whole point. In order to know that you're already breathing, you don't need to concentrate on the parts of your body to reveal to you that you're already breathing. The knowledge that you're breathing is already there, so don't forget it. Don't forget that the body is already breathing. See it at the back of your mind. Don't stop doing things in a sense of like, I don't know, if you're walking or sitting or something. Obviously, you can't be too occupied with your attention, like reading and doing stuff that would take too much of your attention. But you don't have to concentrate on top of withdrawing from activities in order to see what's already there. You don't need to concentrate on your breath to know that it's there. So just go to a non-disturbed, like quiet place. Bring your mindfulness to the fore, as they said, parimukkham. The point is just, okay, stop being distracted and sit down and recognize what's already there. So let that memory of your breath that's happening right there while you're remembering it, let it be there in the peripheral. Let it endure. You don't have to, okay, now I do this and now I do that, and where does that lead? No. It leads nowhere. It leads there. Where it begins, that's where it ends. It begins with recollect that he breathes in, recollect that he breathes out. That's the beginning and the end. So I know that there's a tendency to overthink it, because obviously all the contemporary meditations, and not just even Buddhists, have mystified the breath long enough, and now there is all these implicit assumptions and hopes and tendencies associated with this practice. But really, mindfully he breathes in, mindfully he breathes out. Non-forgetfully he breathes in, non-forgetfully he breathes out. See how that feels. Just sit down and let the body breathe, and try to not completely forget about it. The mind will come up with stuff, but don't completely drift away. That's the point. As the other suttas do say that. I think it was that Arita Sutta in Majjhima or somewhere, I don't remember, who said basically this is how he practices the breathing. Recollect that he breathes in, recollect that he breathes out. He abandons all the patiga, he abandons sensuality of the past and the future and present, and all the patiga in regard to the body has also been abandoned. That's how he fulfills it. And the Buddha says, yeah, sure, that is obviously the way. However, it's not complete. And then he goes to expound on these other additional steps, which are not steps. It's just refinements of the refinement aspects of the same principle, which is recollected, breathe in, recollected, breathe out. So if that becomes established, like in other words, when it doesn't matter how much your attention shifts and goes from here to there, at the back of your mind, if it's been broadened enough, there's always going to be at least a grain of recognition that there is breathing in and breathing out. That's it. So that's how you would then you could refine that. So now within that peripheral recognition of breathing in, breathing out, you would recognize that you are breathing in long, that you're breathing out long. Before it was just breathing in and out. Doesn't matter how, it was too much basically to discern that. But now you can discern. You can discern that it's long, you can discern that it's short. And you understand that. You see it. You don't need to attend to it. You don't need to monitor every second of it. Quite the opposite. If you do, you will lose the sight of it. That's kind of the point of the entire, any practice of sati is to unabsorb you from your senses, from your observations, from your overly concentrated attitude. That's why I keep saying modern meditations and practices are taking you in the completely opposite direction of where the Dhamma is. So once you define even that, like now peripherally, not just that you know you're breathing in, not just that you're not forgetting that you're breathing out, you are also knowing and understanding that you're breathing in long and that you're breathing out long, that you're breathing in short, that you're breathing out short. So the knowledge of that has been even more refined. In other words, the sight, the range of your peripheral without needing to attend to it directly has been expanded. So then you can train further. He trains like this, experiencing the whole body, I'll breathe in. So what does that mean? Well, that means that within the memory of the in-breath that is happening right now, I shall outline this internal body. This body that this previous paragraph would have been talking about. So as I said, the internal body is always overlooked. That's why through developing anapanasati correctly in this indirect method, you are developing the peripheral, which means whether you want it or not, you are developing the internal recognition of the internal body. So you could now make the actual, like a more active effort that within that peripheral, you discern the extent of your physicality without needing to directly attend to it. Because if you do, it's not the body you're seeing, it's the objects of your senses, of your body. So that's why it's like he trains like this. In other words, make the effort to peripherally, once you become familiar with it, outline that which body is, that full sphere of internal, that which shares that nature of these fourth grade elements externally that are obviously changing and so on. So experiencing the whole body, I'll breathe in, experiencing the whole body, I'll breathe out. He trains further, calming the bodily activity, I'll breathe in. So see, you don't calm the bodily activity without even recognizing the extent of that body. You can't calm your physicality if you don't even see the phenomenon of physicality there peripherally. So that's why once you see it, now you could actually calm it. So calming the body activity, I'll breathe in. Calming the body activity, I'll breathe out. Those are, by the way, still all refinements of this very thing. Recollect that he breathes in, recollect that he breathes out. They are not extra steps. Then he trains like this. Experiencing joy, I'll breathe in. Experiencing joy, I'll breathe out. See, now you're getting even on a subtler level, which is not even so concerned with physicality anymore. Now you should just train. See, if you would have refined your indirect attention on that peripheral level to the point of calming the physicality without direct falling into a trap of directly attending to it, you could now just experience joy. Like generate joy on the level of those feelings there peripherally. So experiencing joy, I'll breathe in. Experiencing joy, I'll breathe out. Experiencing ease, I'll breathe in. Experiencing ease, I'll breathe out. So these are kind of precursors. Basically, it's about the feelings that are obviously, as I said before, they're kind of neither in your physicality nor on the level where your mind is, but they're factually there. So when the physicality is tamed enough, sufficiently discerned on that peripheral level, what's left there, whatever's felt there, you could then actually calm it. You could ease it. You could be joyful in it, so to speak. You could experience happiness on account of it, because it's already quite purified, obviously. So then the next step is experiencing the mind activity. In other words, you're going to find your mind active. That chitta, that animal, will have some activity to some extent. And you want to outline that. Just as you were outlining the whole body, just as you were outlining the feelings through joy and ease, now you're outlining the mind, experiencing the mind activity. Why do you need to outline the mind? Well, outlining the mind in a very accurate sense on that far developed peripheral level that you're seeing on that internal, in that internal dimension, to put it that way. Experiencing, discerning, outlining the mind is a precursor to step 2. Now you could calm it. Now you could really just calm that animal down. Just tell it to, okay, sit down. While I breathe in, I shall be seating this mind. While I breathe out, I shall be seating it further. So until it just calms down. Once it's completely calm, seated, it is, you can experience it even more. As in outline it clearer in its calm, immovable state. So experiencing the mind, I'll breathe in. Experiencing the mind, I'll breathe out. Gladdening the mind. Literally gladdening the animal. Like gladden it, uplift it. Because you are on the level of directly communicating to it through your indirect development of not directly attending to the peripheral level where you've been discerning these things more and more and more. So once you calm the mind, once you outline the mind, once you calmed it, once you gladdened it, you can compose it, you can liberate it, you could tell it basically turn away from everything that you've been going after, because both of us see now that it's not worth it. And the mind will listen because you have showed it that it's not worth it. How you show that it's not worth it? Well, you showed it through the perception of impermanence, perception of non-beauty, development of friendliness, compassion, contentment, equanimity. But anyway, we'll deal with it later. So he goes here to do the same, actually. So he trains further. Now that the mind is being liberated and it's listening and it's composed, you then maintain the perspective of impermanence while you breathe in. So while breathe in, while breathe out, just means basically, it's another way of saying the peripheral dimension discerned through not directly attending it maintains. It's maintained. It endures. So within that, you now think of impermanence. Within that, you think of dispassion. You think of cessation. You think of relinquishment. These are the perceptions that now are directly talking to your mind, which is also over there, peripherally, where that physicality is, which is why you started with physicality and feelings and so on before you were able to outline the mind. Fully, obviously, you've got some idea. So that's why when the recollection of breathing, when developed and cultivated in this way, it's very fruitful, beneficial. In other words, there will be nothing that you haven't addressed. And when the recollection of breathing is developed and cultivated this way, even one's final breath ceases knowingly, not unknowingly. So if anapanasati is to be understood how people think of it today as I must concentrate on my breath in order to know it, you're never going to be able to know your final breath, because death always comes as a surprise. So this is the very exact point that the Buddha wants to illustrate here, is that even final breath, which is always a surprise to an untrained mind, cannot not be included in that sufficiently developed peripheral recognition of non-directly attending to your breathing, yet knowing that it's there. So if you would have developed that thoroughly on a day-to-day basis, even the utmost surprise cannot make you not see that extent. Cannot make you lose perspective and ignore it. So even the last breath will be known, not because you'll be waiting, hunting for it there to not miss it, like a bullet train or something. No, it will be known because it will be included. It will be included because your mind has already surmounted the whole thing. It's in front of it, how you pretty much started the practice. So that's what the Buddha said. Venerable Rahula was obviously very pleased. So let me just address a few more things. Yeah, so back onto the friendliness, and like it kind of like develop friendliness to abandon the ill will. So people think, see, so I do metta. Well, develop friendliness. Nobody says you shouldn't develop it. It's how you develop it. What do you do about it? Does develop friendliness mean go and think positive thoughts about people that you hate? But does that mean your hate came from those people? So does your ill will come from people that upset you? If not, then why do you need to think positive thoughts of those people when they are not the problem? Because if your ill will does come from those people, well, good luck overcoming it, because their actions will never be in your control. And if their actions are truly the cause, the beginning of your ill will, you can never uproot it. You can only put a perfect patch on it every time it comes up. So yes, develop friendliness, but that still doesn't justify the contemporary ideas of metta, which are absolutely ridiculous. So how do you then develop friendliness? Well, by recognizing the roots of your aversion. And what is the root of your aversion? Well, it's your own resistance to your own sense bases. So first, it's not sense objects. Therefore, others or non-others, it's absolutely irrelevant. Second, if you're not withdrawn from sense objects fully, thoroughly, through virtue and restraint, you're not even going to outline the internal dimension as we just been through, as we just discussed. So there is a reason the Buddha said these practices after, like you would have been outlining everything through the peripheral recognition of the nature of the elements that your own physicality partakes in. So then when you are basically, say you would have been practicing those contemplations regularly, you wanna sit down and meditate, contemplate, sit down and start pondering on this nature, start developing the peripheral discernment, including things into it, so that nothing is left out, so that you don't even have to go around thinking about those things actively through your focused attention, because they'll be on the level of the knowledge now. They're known, they're understood. You can go about your day knowing those things. So once you would have practiced that, then yes, you could then also, on that same indirect level, practice friendliness. Literally, develop the non-ill will towards your own sense bases. So these sense bases, these sense domains that have their own feeding grounds, as the Sutta say, when the sight, sound, smell, taste, touches / sensations land, if they're uncomfortable, you twitch. The sense bases twitch. You're averse to that. There is resistance, there is patiga. That's the root of all hate. I mean, you wouldn't be able to hate your neighbor who said something upsetting if you didn't hear what he said. But obviously, those levels are not seen. So all you see is the neighbor. All you see is his intentions. All you see how he's been doing this all the time. And you just keep winding yourself up around your own projected views. But fundamentally, it's really your own ears, eyes, nose, body that you're resisting. That is what the root of your aversion is. So spread metta to yourself. Not in a sense to love yourself, because that would be equally ignorant, But recognize that the aversion comes from you not being trained in regard to your own internal sense bases. These things that sight, sound, smell, taste, touches land on, so to speak. So if you choose to, on that, see, like if you would have been developed in regard to physicality rightly, now you could say you could be recognizing the internal domains, where the pressure comes up, where the aversion manifests, and not be averse towards that. So don't be averse towards that pang of aversion that happens internally. But by that point, obviously, you would have had to stop blaming the world, stop blaming others, even if it's like, the most justifiable thing to do. It's because of, what he said, she did, or something. No, all of that is second. The root of aversion, it's always my own resistance to my own sense bases, sense organs. You can say it that way. So that's pretty much what triggers everything else that then proliferates and spreads and gets projected onto the world and actions that follow. So if you develop non-resistance, if you develop friendliness, just be a friend towards your own internal senses when they are averse. Just like a friend say, okay, let's not make this worse. Let's not act out of it. Calm down. The mind's going to come up and says, no, but it's because of he said, if you don't do anything about it, he'll do it again and they'll do it again. And then the whole thing will go through. It's like, it doesn't matter. All of those are traps. All of those are to make me act towards it and overlook where the real problem is, which is my own aversion towards this internal thing that I have not been trained myself in regard to. But if you do, again, there's absolutely nothing that can come from the world that could surprise you or make you overlook that. So you would be abandoning ill will by killing it at its roots. And then same goes for the other four Brahmaviharas. The point is, they're all developed on that progressively more refined state of the peripheral, of the discernment what's internal, and further and further and further. But yeah, just stick with metta if you want on that level, and you will be unable to hate, because the framework of non-hate towards the root, towards the trigger of aversion, which is your sense bases when they encounter things that are disagreeable, that framework doesn't change. That framework is now unfaltering. That framework cannot be lost. Because again, you have a direct verification that no amount of pressure can touch you. No amount of pressure can cause that aversion and snowball into actions and so on. But again, as the other suttas also say, in order to develop Brahma Viharas, you need to dwell like a Brahma. You need to be thoroughly withdrawn from all the unwholesome, so that this internal physicality and aspect and the sense basis, because the Buddha compared the sense basis as they're negative, they're like empty village and so on, that you cannot possibly just put in front of you and see it like you would see sight, sound, smell, taste, touches. So they're the utmost fundamental negative. So, and then goes, those perceptions of impermanence, and so I addressed that. So the point, so as maybe it was clear, but maybe I can just repeat. Like if we just read this sutta, the just the part about anapanasati, and if you're able to just put everything else you heard about anapanasati aside, all the Burmese methods, all the energy manipulations, all the nostril watching, just forget about all of it. Just read it on its own terms. See what honestly would come up to your mind as what would I do? How would I go about doing this? And really try to understand it on that level. Because that's the point. As I said, people fall into these expectations because they learned about it through these techniques and methods and so on. But just don't try and do anapanasati. Sit down, recognize what's there. As we said, recollect the breathe in, breathe out, and stick with that. Because that should be enough, by the way, to outline the entire domain of the internal even more clearly, and certainly should be enough to remove all the patiga eventually. That resistance, that aversion that you have towards aversion of your sense bases, that will also be abandoned. So if you just even do that basic general practice of non-forgetfulness of breathing, you would be free from sensuality and ill will. So if you put everything you learned about it aside, as I said, like, I can give you, oh, this is what anapanasati is about, but no, really just sit down with it yourself and just try not to forget about your breathing and see where it takes you. So it can kind of eventually sort of build up and paint a different picture of what anapanasati is actually about. But obviously, as I said, if you're just doing it on top of your non-virtue, non-restraint, good luck. I mean, technically speaking, Anapanasati Sutta was taught to Sotapannas as a form of Satipatthana. It was a form that was taught to at least Sotapannas. But again, that's not to say you shouldn't be trying it, but you should be trying to do it rightly. Because in order to practice Anapanasati, you need to be seeing your mind. In order to see your mind, you need to have been discerning Chitta Nimitta sufficiently, and that's already a step away from Sotapatti. So you want to practice anapanasati, do it, but don't do it at the expense of the actual training. Actual training in virtue, training in withdrawal, training in enduring things on the right level, and everything else. We talk about it on and on and on. So in the same sense, like if we are withdrawn from, as I said, falling into the common expectations of what anapanasati is all about, and just read the sutta, what is the purpose of it? So you could already see it's not a beginner's practice, obviously. The Buddha went through all this other stuff and the elements and maintaining this context before, say, you are equipped to practice anapanasati. But anyway, that doesn't mean you can't get the right idea of what it's about. And you realize that since the whole point is to be developing that peripheral, the recognition of peripheral, the non-forgetfulness, means it's exactly, as I said, it's exactly the opposite of the common idea of concentration and absorption practices. So the main purpose of anapanasati is to unabsorb you from your senses. By being unabsorbed, you get a full picture. You get that negative of what those senses refer to, what the sense objects refer to, what the sense object point to. And that's how you start to outline the physicality, outline the feelings, outline the moods. So yeah, you won't be able to just start practicing anapanasati rightly, because it's really a training of that, as we said, mindfulness, of that recollectedness that broadens the peripheral recognition without needing to directly attend to it. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't be thinking about it or trying to do it, especially if it's paired with your virtue, with your sense restraint, with training in virtue. I don't want to just, I keep saying with virtue, but that implies with training in virtue, not just blindly keeping the virtue, but actually training in the principles by body, speech, and mind.